Welcome back to this week's video, folks. This week we're going to explore a sketching technique that I've been using recently when working on some concepts for a course that I'm building at the moment. So the main idea behind all of these tips I'm about to share is that we want to remove as many barriers between us and what we're creating as possible. And we're going to do that by reverting back to using extremely primitive tools, about as primitive as we can go. So in the context of Photoshop, sketching out this idea here, I'm using a round brush with some opacity on it, default round brush, and I'm blocking in large shapes. And really at the moment, all I'm doing is I'm searching for shapes. I'm kind of softening my mind, I'm softening my gaze, and I'm just thinking about designing this sci-fi crate and finding some forms that I find interesting. So half of this design process is happening on the canvas, and half of it is happening in my brain, where I'm kind of seeing a design emerge, finding different ideas in the randomness, and also intentionally laying down some marks that indicate certain ideas. So the power of this technique is that it'll get your brain going, it'll get your brain thinking about the design, and you're not going to be bogged down by perspective or line weight or anything like that. It'll be purely the idea. So I have the idea roughed out on the canvas and in my mind, and the second technique that I'll be using now is using the same principle, and that is, what's the most primitive tool that I can use right now that's going to remove all barriers between me and the idea I'm trying to convey. So hard round brush set to 1 pixel with full opacity here. And now all I'm trying to do is solve the design that I can see in my head in a way that is understandable on the canvas. So because I'm not worrying about the brush's opacity or the line weight, I'm not even thinking that much about getting the perspective 100% correct. All I'm doing at the moment is trying to solve what are the forms exactly. I have an idea of what they are in my brain, but I need to solve exactly what those forms are doing on the canvas. And also, I'm trying to solve the equation of how do I make this a good design? How can I arrange the shapes in a way that's pleasing, that makes sense, and that has a good visual hierarchy? So part of the power of this technique is that I can focus purely on the design, on solving those questions about form in a really efficient way. Like if I was blocking this out in 3D, sure, it might be more accurate, but my design decision-making process would be incredibly slow. And in fact, I'd probably start getting distracted on executing the different forms that I wanted technically. And I'd start worrying more about that than about coming up with a pleasing design. And it really gets me into the mental headspace of flow and play. Because I'm using such crude tools, I'm also not being overly self-conscious about the marks that I'm putting down, and I'm able to engage in almost like a state of play. I'm working on a video at the moment that talks much more about this mindset, so if you don't want to miss that, do consider subscribing, because I think it's an aspect of design that I don't see a lot of people talking about. Last step in this process, and again, I'm choosing the most basic tool that I possibly can for the job, for the problem I'm trying to solve. At the moment, that problem is still design related. So how do I break up the materials in a way that supports the design I've established? So I'm breaking up those rest areas, leaning into the 70-30 or 80-20 rule of 80% rest, 20% detail. I'm using some secondary material breakup to enhance the flow that I've established. And also I'm clustering the most high contrast areas of detail on the focal point. So pretty basic design fundamentals type stuff, but using basic tools to do it is allowing me to completely focus on that and nothing else, and have a really fast approach. So last step to this, again, using very basic tools and just going in and adding a multiply layer to indicate shadows to help describe the forms a little better. And I'm just hitting some of those beveled edges with a highlight. And this stage is just about making the design a little bit easier to read. So why have I taken this approach? Why has this helped me, and how can this help you be a more valuable asset to a production team? Well, the job of a concept artist is to take what's in their brain, use the tools available to them to produce a design that can be then used for production. So the reason that's valuable is because they're solving those design problems and they're using a process that's highly efficient. And so I want to point out the fact that as concept artists, we often have a lot of tools in our toolkit. We have a lot of custom brushes. We use 3D, we use VR, we use photo bashing, and each of those options is a tool in our tool belt. And sometimes we might choose an option that takes much more time and it's the wrong tool for the job in a given production step and in a particular process for solving a particular problem. So if I needed to solve a level design or layout, then 3D is probably the right choice. However, if the problem I'm solving is coming up with lots of designs in an exploration phase as quickly as possible, then oftentimes 3D is probably not the correct choice, unless you've come up with some kind of workflow that you know so well to the point where you can match the production speed of, say, doing some thumbnail napkin sketches. The other reason to be choosing the right tools and the most basic tools for something like sketch exploration is it's removing all distractions and mental barriers between you and the design problem-solving aspect. So that's a basic summary, and here are some designs that I came up with using this approach. Each of these took probably around 20 minutes to complete. So some of these I've created for a course I'm developing, and if there's something that interests you, you can sign up to the mailing list in the description to hear about it first. And I encourage you to give this technique a go, whether that's using the exact tools in this video or just adopting the concept of stripping back your tools to something really basic that allows you to think purely in design terms. If you do try it, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below.